Welcome to the Actually I Can Female Entrepreneur podcast. I am your host, Kayleigh Greenacre, a business strategist, coach, TEDx speaker, author, and your go-to woman for all things business strategy. I am obsessed with supporting female entrepreneurs to grow unstoppable six and multi-six-figure businesses that they love, giving them the freedom and life that they desire. During this podcast, I'll be sharing with you everything that you need to become a successful female entrepreneur, from the mindset shifts to sales and marketing strategies, and how to become an iconic leader that people can't get enough of. It is my mission to help you stand out, attract your dream clients and customers, and sell out of your offers with ease whilst building the business and life of your dreams. Let's make this your reality, ladies. Hello, ladies, and welcome to another episode of Actually I Can, the Female Entrepreneur podcast. And in today's episode, I'm going to be diving into why entrepreneurs will blend in more than ever before this year in the online space and how to make sure that you don't. So I want to talk about something that I'm noticing more and more as we've moved into this year. And it's not something that people are openly admitting, but it is happening. And that is a flattening of individuality. Now, I'm sure if you're working in the online space, you will know that everything looks more polished than ever before, more structured, more professional, content is cleaner, messaging is sharper, production quality is really high. And on the surface, that sounds like progress, it sounds fantastic. But underneath that, I can feel something else happening. The space is becoming more competent and less distinct. Now, many entrepreneurs are intelligent, they're capable, they're ambitious, they are not lacking ideas, they are not lacking the skill, but this year, many of them are feeling something that they can't quite articulate. They're doing all the right things on paper, they're doing the things that they've been taught by other entrepreneurs and other mentors, and yet something feels really, really flat. Engagement feels fine, but it's not really standing out. Visibility is there, but it's not really powerful visibility. They are being seen, but they're not being chosen at the level that they want. And a lot of people are actually being left behind because it's actually the iconic leaders that are making the sales and that are quite simply wiping out the industry. So when we zoom out a little bit on this, what I'm seeing is most entrepreneurs will blend in this year. Not because they're not good enough, but because the environment honestly has changed. And as we know, the rise of AI, the refinement of content tools, the constant exposure to other people's messaging, it's creating a space where it's easier than ever to sound impressive, but it's harder than ever to really stand out as an icon. So in this episode, this is all about understanding what is actually happening psychologically in the space and deciding consciously that you are not going to dilute yourself and make sure that you are standing out so you're not left behind. So let's dive into this. Okay, let's start off by talking about AI, because I know that this is a topic on everyone's mind at the moment. There is a lot of surface level conversation happening. Either it's excitement or it's anxiety about the competition and how AI can really start to take over and potentially put some people's jobs and businesses at risk. But I think there's very little depth about what this actually means for the positioning of you and your business. Now, AI, as we know, has raised that baseline. That's what it's done. It's made it easier than ever to create well-written, structured, helpful content, basically very, very quickly. And it has removed friction from execution. And in doing so, it has actually removed the advantage of simply sounding competent. Now, 5 years ago, being able to articulate an idea clearly and structure a persuasive caption, to be honest with you, felt really, really impressive. When you'd read something, you'd be like, wow, like this person's incredible. She gets it. She gets me. But now it's kind of what is expected because everyone can just ask AI to create something for them. And this is stopping people from being differentiated because everyone is sounding the same. Now, this is where many entrepreneurs misinterpret what is happening. They assume that solution is to become even more polished, to become even more strategic, even more optimized. But
what we need to focus on, rather than being polished, we need to focus on perspective. And perspective is formed through your lived experiences, right? Tested thinking, contradictions, experimentation, conversations that you're having with your clients, mistakes that you might have made, emotional resilience, not necessarily through the automation and through the creation of using AI. AI can mimic anything. It can mimic a structure. It can mirror your tonality. It can synthesize data, but it cannot embody conviction. It cannot replace you. Okay, it can't replace your thinking. So, what I want you to do when we're thinking about AI to make sure that you don't get lost in this crowd and you do stand out for the rest of this year is I want you to think about this. Are you building your authority on structure or perspective? If someone took away your formatting, your hooks, your templates, would your thinking still feel distinctive? That is the real question. So when it comes to AI, I'm going to leave it there because it's a really, really good question to ask yourself. I'll repeat that again. Are you building your authority on structure or perspective? If someone took away your formatting, your hooks, your templates, would your thinking still feel distinctive? Now, one practical way to strengthen this is to reduce pre-consumption before creation. Okay, so before you write, before you refine anything, before you optimize anything, ask yourself, what are you actually thinking about? Okay, what is the topic? Write your unfiltered version first. Okay, not the AI version, not the refined version, the real unfiltered one, the honest one that actually comes from your heart. Then you can refine it because that will support you in making sure that you don't lose your voice. We don't want you to lose your voice through AI. So that is all about AI. And it's something that I would really recommend you doing as a kind of practical tip as such when you next write content. So let's talk about safe content now, because safe content I think can feel quite comfortable for us as entrepreneurs. And this is where things get uncomfortable because safe content feels really productive. It performs, right? It educates. It rarely offends anyone. It gets the engagement. It feels responsible. It feels strategic. But what safe content does is it rarely creates the attachment, and that attachment is what actually builds our businesses. Now, authority is not created when people nod, okay, when they agree with you. It's actually created when people feel something, when they feel clarity, when they feel seen, when they feel heard, when they feel understood, potentially even stretched. Safe content avoids any friction, it avoids tension, it avoids specificity. And psychologically, when you avoid that, you become someone who just blends in because you're not actually standing up for what you believe in, your vision, your values, your beliefs, and you're not allowing your audience to really feel something because that general advice or generic kind of content, it could be attributed to anyone. So, what I want you to do when thinking about the content and making sure it's not safe, when was the last time that you published something that felt slightly risky, but it was really honest? Not controversial for attention. We're not here to create content to, rile people up and upset anyone. That's not what I'm talking about. But piece of content that's honest enough that it exposed your actual real thinking. Because if you're constantly editing yourself to avoid any misunderstanding or you're worrying about what other people think, you're also editing out your magnetism. And remember, magnetism, that requires a stance, but it's also what will attract people to you. It requires you to define what you believe works and what doesn't. It requires you to articulate any standards that you have rather than offering suggestions. You've got to stand up. You've got to be able to share with your audience what you truly believe. Now, a practical shift or a practical tip that I'm going to give you here is to choose one belief, okay, this month. Just choose one that you're willing to articulate fully, not just kind of the surface level of this. I want you to go really, really deep in this, okay? And I want you to ask yourself, where did this come from? What shaped it? And what have you seen repeatedly that reinforces it? and then let your audience see your thinking process. And that is what will allow you to build authority, okay? And not create just safe content. This will allow you to create that magnetism and build that authority. So that is how to avoid safe content. And like I said, leaning into what you truly believe in. So choose one belief for the rest of this month that you're willing to dive into and really articulate fully. Okay, let's next talk about recognition, because there's lots of different elements of this podcast that I really want to dive into with you to really support you in standing out and not getting lost. Now, there is a profound difference between being seen and being remembered. Okay, visibility is important, as we know, and it's kind of like frequency, but recognition is all about your identity. So you can post every day, all right, and still not be recognizable, because you can post, you can create content, you can say the things, but ultimately, if you are not allowing yourself to be seen as that iconic leader, if you are not allowing your audience to really connect with you, they're not going to feel anchored, they're not going to feel connected. Now, recognition is built when your thinking becomes familiar, okay? So when your perspectives deepen rather than pivoting constantly, okay? So one of the reasons women or female entrepreneurs blend in is that they adapt too quickly. They absorb or hook onto lots of these trends, okay? They shift their messaging every week, or because they've seen someone else do it and it worked for them. They potentially might even soften, their language or what they want to say. And that is stopping them. It's stopping them again from standing out. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that you are repeating the belief. Again, repeating your vision, your values, your beliefs. If someone followed you for 6 whole months, this is a really, really good question to ask yourself. If someone followed you for 6 whole months, what would they know you stand for? Without even hesitating, what are they going to say? What would they know that you stand for? And if the answer feels really, really vague, that's what you need to work on. You need to really think about, what is it that you stand for? So an exercise that I do with a lot of my clients, and if you've ever been in any of my low ticket offers or potentially even in my free courses, one of the questions that I always ask is, what is your zone of genius? Like, what is your one thing that you want people to know you for? And this can't be, oh, I'm a mindset coach that supports middle-aged women with X, Y, and Z. That's not specific. It's got to be something really, really super kind of niche and narrow. And it's got to be that one thing that you are so passionate about, that you talk about every single day. I want you to think about that one thing. If you haven't yet refined this, I want you to work on this, because believe me, if there's anything that you can improve on and work on now with your positioning, with standing out, it is this. And I want you to really look at it. I don't want you to reinvent anything. I want you to look at what you're really good at, what really lights you up, what you're really passionate about, and then I want you to refine it. That is what's going to help you stand out. And that will support you in attracting more of your ideal clients. Now, this kind of leads on to the next thing that I want to talk about, which is positioning. Now, positioning is talked about an awful lot, and this is one of the elements that I specialize in, especially helping my clients become iconic leaders. Positioning is not branding, right? It's basically psychological clarity. Now, most women, female entrepreneurs, describe their client externally, okay? So they might describe what she does, she or he, what they want, what they struggle with on the surface, but very few entrepreneurs describe their ideal client's internal tension. So some questions here to kind of think about is, when you're thinking about your ideal client, okay, before we actually even dive into the full positioning of this, when you're thinking about your ideal client, what is she, he, or they privately exhausted by? What contradiction are they holding? What identity are they outgrowing? What standard are they ready to rise to? These are all the types of questions that you should be asking yourself about the ideal client. Yes, it's important to get their the client avatar in terms of their age and who they are and where they're from and how they, wake up every morning. But we've got to go deeper than that, right? Really, really deep. And I think when you speak to that emotional tension, you will be allowed to build that attachment with them, that connection. They will be able to really feel something and be able to resonate with some of the questions or some of the pieces of content that you actually do create. When you speak to those surface level problems, you're only going to really build the awareness, okay? But it's the attachment, it's the depth that we want, because that is what will bring the sales in. So instead of asking how to reach more people, I want you to really think about how can you articulate your client's internal world more precisely. This will support you and help you with your positioning. Okay, observe your clients. Like, notice the language that they're speaking. Notice the things that they hesitate on. Maybe the patterns of doubt. Really, really look at who they are and how they're moving, how they're acting, how they're walking, how they're talking. Exactly who they are. The more emotionally precise you are, the more magnetic you will become. And again, this will support you with your positioning, right? So this kind of links to your messaging and your positioning all tied into one, but we've got to make sure that we are speaking to them on a deep emotional level. All right. So that's a little bit around kind of messaging, but obviously leaning into that positioning. And the final bit that I want to talk about today is all about the internal work that is preventing you from quite simply standing out. Now, blending in the online space, I wouldn't say it's a content problem. It is actually a self-trust problem. And I think when you trust your own thinking, you communicate differently. You really, really do. When you trust your experience, you do position differently. And when you trust your standards, you attract people differently. So if you're constantly looking outward for validation before expressing any ideas, you will unconsciously soften that. Okay. And so what we want to do is we want to make sure that you've got that full self-trust. If you're constantly consuming before you create as well, you will unconsciously mirror that. If you're constantly optimizing for, performance to make sure that your content does really, really well, you will unconsciously dilute the voice and the message that you want to say. So the deeper work is strengthening your internal anchor, right? So spend more time refining your beliefs, spend less time worrying about what people are going to say or how many likes you're going to get on your content. That doesn't matter. We have to make sure that you have that self-trust in your vision, your values, your beliefs. One of the things that I would always say, and I say this to my clients as well, is the very first thing we need to look at, especially if you're kind of in a place where you're sort of struggling a little bit, is look at those core values. Like, what are the core values? Really make sure that they are clear. Those core values, because everything should be rooted around those. And then make sure that you spend some time really leaning into what your vision is, what your values are, what your beliefs are, what your mission is, and actually how can you execute that? How can you share it with your audience, with your listeners? How can you make sure that you're communicating that in a way that has conviction, where your confidence shines through, and you're not having to rely on basically sort of, again, diluting your voice because you're looking at what other people are doing and you're being potentially pulled away in a slightly different direction. You're not actually leaning into what you believe in. So this has really got to come from you. And it is that self-trust, believing that your vision, your values, your beliefs, your opinions, that is worth sharing, because they are the things that people will feel anchored towards, that people will attach, what people will be able to resonate towards. And it's all of the things that we've been talking about in this episode. So this year in the online space, people will be rewarded for depth. Okay, that is what's going to help. It will reward you if you're willing to think independently, to speak really clearly, and to repeat, yourself enough that actually your recognition is that anchor. Remember, it's the repetition of having the same conversation, but in slightly different perspectives. It's that one thing, your zone of genius. What are you an iconic leader for, right? And really lean into that and make sure that it's really, really clear. I really, really hope that that has helped. Now, if this conversation today has resonated and you're ready to become an iconic leader in your industry who sells on repeat, then this is exactly the work that we go deeper into inside both Unstoppable and Iconic, the mastermind within the Iconic Era movement. And if you're not sure which space is right for you, or you simply just want to explore what stepping into this next level could look like, then just drop me a DM on Instagram with the word iconic, and then let's have a conversation and I'll see how I can support you. Thank you so much for joining us for today's episode. Please don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast, and I will see you all again next time. Take care.
Thank you for tuning in to the Actually I Can Female Entrepreneur Podcast with me, your host, Kayleigh Greenacre. If you are ready to build, grow, and scale your dream six-figure or multi-six-figure business, then head to our website now for more information or connect with me on socials to see how you can create your dream business and dream life.